Hi, it's Wednesday, August 20th, and we have several systems active in the tropics today. The first one and primary focus of the video is going to be Hurricane Erin off the U.S. southeast coast. This is a large hurricane which is going to bring impacts to the entire U.S. coast over the next few days and potentially Bermuda as well as it recurves out to sea. And we could also see some impacts in southeast Canada as it recurves away. We've also got a couple of tropical waves out here in the tropical Atlantic. This leading one could form as tracks towards the Lesser Antilles as we get towards this weekend and into early next week. And another one southwest of the Cabo Verde Islands. No imminent threat to land, but we'll talk about this briefly at the end of the video. Okay, starting off with Hurricane Erin, you can see just from this picture alone that the hurricane has grown in size quite a bit, as we talked about it would, through structural changes as the system gains latitude. And now we're getting to the point of getting closer to peak impacts in the east coast of the U.S., particularly along the coast of North Carolina. And we're going to be seeing over the next day or more strong onshore push with very high waves, and that will likely lead to storm surge flooding of potentially 2 to 4 feet along the Outer Banks coast, and that will lead to some significant impacts there. But across the entire coast, we're going to be seeing those high waves propagate around the system as it churns up the water across the entire western Atlantic. And it's going to make for dangerous beach conditions and potential for coastal flooding along the entire U.S. coast as a hurricane moves up the coast. This is a closer up view of it. You can see just how big it is on this big view compared to some states in the U.S. You can fit, just for example, North Carolina and South Carolina in this cloud field now and still have room to spare. And the expansion of the cloud field also means that the wind field has expanded. And we can see this very clearly if we look at recon data or reload this so we can get the latest pass or data rather from the Hurricane Hunter planes. And you can see on the eastern side especially, there's very, very strong winds of potentially Cat 2, Cat 3 force at flight level on the eastern side. Now, the western side is a little bit weaker, but we still have a significant expansion of the hurricane force winds. Anything in these purple barbs that you see here is capable of bringing hurricane force winds at the surface in the form of wind gusts. But tropical storm force winds is a much broader area of expanse, and that's going to be the primary concern going forward for North Carolina and Bermuda. The good news with this is that the hurricane force wind field is forecast to stay, for the most part, offshore. You can see this on the HAFS model showing you the wind field of the hurricane as we go out to tomorrow morning. This is by the time we're at closest approach to the Outer Banks of North Carolina. And you can see the hurricane force wind field is still quite large like it is now, but we're so far offshore that it's not really a concern. We're not talking about a hurricane warning in North Carolina here. We've got a tropical storm warning because these areas in the green, that's tropical storm force winds, and you can see it is expanding considerably and expands across a wide distance. And on this model, we have tropical storm force winds raking the Outer Banks coast, and this could lead to some power outages as well into this area. Now, across the rest of the coast, this tropical storm force wind field is probably not going to get too much further west than that. We do have a tropical storm warning in effect through southern Virginia on the eastern coast of that state, and that's for gusts that could get to tropical storm force and perhaps some outer bands that may try to make their way towards the coast, but sustained seems rather unlikely there, just given the trajectory we are by this point where the hurricane is. Now, for Bermuda, this does look like a good forecast right now, and things do certainly look good than they were a few days ago, where now we're still significantly far west of the island, and you can see the tropical storm force wind field has some distance here between the island. But like I talked about a couple of days ago, the system is going to be making a bit of a hard right when it recurves into the North Atlantic, and it's going to mean this tropical storm force wind field may get rather close to the island, even though we're tracking further west than we were talking about a few days ago. And you can see this with the darker blues and greens getting very close to the island. We do have a tropical storm watch in effect for the island. That means that in the next 48 hours, tropical storm force winds are possible across the island. I don't know if we'll get to a tropical storm warning. If there's more confidence that we're going to be getting this wind field closer, we may see that upgraded to a tropical storm warning. But as of right now, a tropical storm watch seems good because the odds of tropical storm force winds in Bermuda don't seem all too high, maybe 20-30% based on the Hurricane Center advisory, but just be aware that gusts of tropical storm force are possible. But the good news is here, as I've talked about for the past several days, is that the bulk of the wind field, the strongest winds, are going to in all likelihood stay offshore and really are going to be only a concern to some fish out there in the open Atlantic. And really across land masses, we're going to be avoiding the bulk of what this hurricane has to offer near the core of the hurricane. And continuing on beyond this point, as we talked about again, it's going to be turning into a non-tropical cyclone as it passes south of southeast Canada. It does seem we've trended a little bit more offshore in the past couple of days with this forecast, meaning that the wind conditions across the southern coast may not be as bad as originally forecast. Though again, hopefully we do get some needed rainfall here, especially in Newfoundland, to help with some of the wildfire risk. But if we can get away with not dealing with any of these strong wind impacts, we'll certainly take that. And the strongest winds, again with this, are forecast to stay offshore. And beyond that point, the system will be moving into the far North Atlantic and may impact Greenland and Iceland as a powerful non-tropical cyclone by that point. This is the wave forecast from the GFS, looking at this again to show you the extent of how the storm is making the ocean, for lack of a better term, angry across the western Atlantic. You can see this is out to Thursday morning, and anything in the purple here is 20-foot waves or higher, and especially along the coast of North Carolina, along those Outer Banks, where we have those storm surge warnings. Those waves are going to be very high, 15 to 20 feet, maybe higher in some localized spots. And that, with the onshore flow, will likely lead to that water coming ashore. In fact, we've already seen that, and the hurricane is not even north of Jacksonville, that latitude, by this point. So really things are only going to get worse by this point. There was a reason that we had some mandatory evacuations issued along some of the coasts there in the Outer Banks of North Carolina. This is the current forecast from the National Hurricane Center. Putting all this together, you can see the big wind field associated with this hurricane. Tropical storm warning in effect for eastern North Carolina and eastern Virginia. Tropical storm watch for Bermuda. And the system, even though it is quite broad right now, we do seem to be seeing it intensify a little bit, so it will likely reattain major hurricane intensity. But really, for the specifics of the impacts to the U.S. coast and Bermuda, that's not really going to matter all too much because the core winds are going to stay offshore. But you can see losing major hurricane intensity by Friday morning as it begins to track into cooler waters and begin that extratropical transition into a non-tropical cyclone passing well south of southeast Canada. This is the storm surge forecast. You can see across much of the coast from near New York City, Long Island, all the way down to northeastern South Carolina, we could see a general rise of 1 to 3 feet. That could lead to some coastal flooding issues, and that could also be seen in less amounts further down the coast across Florida, Georgia, South Carolina. We do have some coastal flood advisories that wouldn't be up to this level of storm surge, but that could still lead to some coastal flooding outside of these blue areas. And that could also be seen further north along the coast of Massachusetts and Maine further north. But specifically, the biggest danger for storm surge is in the Outer Banks with this yellow area. 2 to 4 feet of storm surge is possible here. And for that reason, we do have not a tropical storm warning, storm surge warning in effect for this part of the coast. That meaning that life-threatening storm surge is likely or expected in that zone where that 2 to 4 feet of inundation is expected above normally dry ground. And finally, across the rest of the coast, the rip current risk is going to be rather high across really the entire U.S. coast. If you're going to the beach, if you're in Florida or Georgia or South Carolina, just be aware that even though the storm is not impacting you directly, the indirect impacts of the high waves across the western Atlantic are going to cause high rip current risks for the next several days. So it's best to stay out of the water and listen to your local weather office and lifeguards for when it does become safe again to swim in the oceans. By, say, this weekend and into early next week, conditions, especially along the southeast coast, should improve markedly from this week as the system continues to go out to sea. But for now, if you're in those red areas and see those double red flags on the beach, best to stay out of the water to avoid any issues with rip currents. You definitely don't want to get caught into those. Okay, moving on, we're going to be talking about the next tropical wave behind Erin. We talked about this briefly couple of days ago. This system has been tracking across the tropical Atlantic for the past few days, and we can see the picture today is very similar to what we had a couple of days ago. We have a very broad tropical wave axis across the central tropical Atlantic today. You can see the southerly winds on the eastern side of this turning to northerly winds on the western side, highlighting a broad trough axis in here. And you can see we have a bunch of sporadic convection surrounding this. Now, development with this system is still decent odds-wise. National Hurricane Center gives us a 60% chance of development in the next 7 days, but over the next couple of days, development is unlikely with this system, just given the size of this wave. You can see that compared to the Lesser Antilles, this wave is enormous. And broad waves like this do tend to take their time in developing because it takes a while to consolidate a more compact area of low pressure. And through time, that will occur because we are getting these sporadic bursts of convection. And through time, this will help make this area of low pressure more compact, or form a more compact area of low pressure rather. And then we could get a tropical cyclone to develop. But of course, the main thing we're talking about is the track of this system. Where is it going to go in the future? Now, imminently, the short-term forecast is that the system is going to be moving into the northern Leeward Islands by late this week, Friday into this weekend, Saturday, Sunday. And you can see this on the GFS model. This is by Friday morning, and you can see the wave axis is now here near the northern Leeward Islands. Now, a benefit that goes in your all's favor with this wave being so broad is that no rapid development is anticipated here. And even the GFS has backed off on showing it becoming a tropical storm. It was likely a little bit too fast with the process of it compacting into a tropical cyclone by the time it comes to these islands. So really right now, the forecast for weather conditions across the northern Leeward Islands and Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico is going to be typical of what you'd expect for a tropical wave coming through here. Scattered showers and storms that may have some gusty winds, maybe in the strongest ones gusting near tropical storm force, but really apart from that, not all too much, because without rapid development, we're not expecting the system to become a tropical storm, and certainly nowhere near a hurricane as it comes through here. So really not too much to worry about with this system. Now, beyond this point, of course, we're going to be wondering, where is it going after this? Is it going to impact areas further west like the Bahamas, the US, or is it just going to harmlessly go out to sea? Now, of course, this is still, some range of a forecast. The exact time when it will be recurving is 4 to 5 days out, so some things could change. But as of right now, it seems that we have gotten into a fairly high confidence scenario for this wave, and that's that it's going to likely come north of the Caribbean islands, and in all likelihood, beyond that point, will recurve out to sea. This is a 500 millibar height, basically what's steering this system out to Saturday morning. By this point, the wave has now come north of the Caribbean, is sitting north of the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. If we look at the pattern north of this, we've got Erin exiting the scene out of southeast Canada, and this is keeping a weakness with this ridge across the subtropical Atlantic, keeping this door open for the storm to come north. Now, we talked about how Erin was important here. How fast or how slow did it exit the scene? And that would determine how fast this ridge could build in and if this wave would be able to track further west. The good news is here with Erin's track further west, it does seem like we are a little bit slower with the departure of this. So this ridge is not able to build in as far west as quickly as Erin departs. And for that reason, we're now seeing models like the GFS back off of its scenarios where it comes into areas further west as a hurricane, and rather instead just goes north of the Caribbean islands and maybe does some impacts to Bermuda, but beyond that, we don't really see all too much. Now, what's backing up this is another trough that's digging out of Canada into the eastern United States. This is going to bring some very nice fall-like weather for the eastern United States, and this has been trending stronger over the past few days. I'll go out to Sunday and Monday, and you can see we have this very strong, very deep trough dug into the eastern United States. And with a trough like this and a ridge like this, this is a guaranteed recurvature pattern for a system in the western Atlantic. And in all likelihood, and all models are now in agreement on this, is that this system will recurve out to sea. We'll have to see about impacts to Bermuda, but beyond that, not really all too much to talk about with this system. Now, we'll have to see exactly how much intensification we could get in this part of the Atlantic. If we look at the 200 millibar flow where the system is, there is a low shear environment. So maybe we could see some intensification on this kind of a track. This might be a little bit east of where Hurricane Erin's cold wake is, which is around here somewhere. So that may allow some room for intensification, and we may have to watch this for Bermuda. But of course, that's it, in time, 5+ days out. So we have time to watch that and see how it develops. Though as of right now, like I mentioned for the Caribbean islands, no rapid development is expected because this is so broad, and that may carry into the intensity forecast going forward, depending how broad it is, if it does eventually become a tropical cyclone. This is the 5-day or 7-day outlook from the National Hurricane Center. They're giving this a 60% chance of development. Environmental conditions seem pretty favorable for this, so I'm in agreement with those odds of development. But you can see that area of formation now aimed towards the north, away from North America. We're unlikely in this kind of a pattern to have this system come west and impact any land areas further west. I think in this, we're all, in all likelihood, going to recurve out to sea. If anything does change with that, of course, this is still, several days out. I'll let you know about it, but this seems to be fairly high confidence by this point. Okay, finally, we've got Invest 99L just southwest of the Cabo Verde Islands. Just to orient yourself, there's those islands. This is the west coast of Africa. And here's our system sitting here just southwest of those islands. And at first glance, this system does look pretty menacing. On the clouds, you can see we have a lot of mid-level rotation in the clouds, which looks pretty circular, but this system has been a little bit more disorganized at the surface. Yesterday, it was unclear if this ever had westerly winds, indicating a closed area of low pressure at the surface. We did get some scatterometer data to show that we do now have those westerly winds on the south side of this, but we do have more of an elongated circulation underneath of the clouds, and this is not a tropical cyclone yet. With time, this may try to become a brief tropical depression or storm, especially with this vigorous convection and rotation in the mid-levels that we have over this system right now. But time is ticking for this system as the environment is going to quickly become rather unfavorable for the system. This is by Friday morning or late tomorrow night, 2 a.m. Friday. And by this point, the wave is here in the tropical Atlantic. And you can see in this flow showing you winds at the top of the troposphere, we have very strong easterly winds now taking over right on top of this system. And if I show you where the system is, it's right here, and if I get a sounding over this, you'll notice that the surface flow here, which is showing you flow near the surface, is rather light. And so the difference between that, the very weak winds at the surface and the very strong winds at the top of the troposphere, makes for a very strong speed shear. And you can see that we're now over 30 knots on this modeled sounding, and whatever kind of convection the system has by this point will easily get sheared apart, and that will cause the system to weaken away. And really, for that reason, the system is not expected to be a long-term threat for now. You can see that this system really struggles over the next few days as it rides pretty low in latitude and deals with that shear. If we do see, the environment may be getting better by the time it does get closer to these islands, we'll have to see how the system responds to the strong shear and how it looks after the strong shear backs off once it gets into this western part of the tropical Atlantic. But there are, you can see, forecast to be strong trade winds by this point. And for a weak tropical wave moving into this region, that is often not good, and that is not favorable in general for waves like this that would be pushing in. So we'll keep watching it in case it does need to be watched beyond, the short term, because it is peak of hurricane season. We're heading into peak of season, so we'll have to watch these waves. And certainly, if this system, is not forming by the Lesser Antilles, there's no guarantee it will not form, further west. You can see we have these strong trade winds in the Eastern and Central Caribbean, but they slow down here in the Western Caribbean. And if this does gain enough latitude into the Western Caribbean, it's a classic sign to see a tropical wave coming into this region with low shear, and with the very warm water that we usually have in this part of the Atlantic, it could form and be a threat to something. But that's a long range thing that we're talking about here. For now, the Central Pacific, not the Central Pacific Hurricane Center, the Climate Prediction Center has outlined this zone for potential development as we head throughout the latter half of the month and into early September. And if that does become a more significant threat or more bona fide threat, we'll talk about it when that happens. Though in the short term, the National Hurricane Center gives us a 40% chance of developing before that shear kicks in. And beyond that point, development is really not expected as it tracks through the tropical Atlantic. And we could see some impacts just as a normal tropical wave would bring in the Windward Islands. But beyond that, nothing really imminent expected here. It seems like we are going into a little bit more of a quieter period here after Hurricane Erin departs further north, which we will certainly take. But we are heading a peak of hurricane season, so certainly that quiet period will come to the end at some point. That's all that I've got for today. Thanks for watching. Stay safe in the U.S. East Coast and Bermuda as Hurricane Erin recurves out to sea. I'll have more videos on these systems as necessary over the next few days. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.